Hi everyone, this is Sveda from Zephyr Lake Carmelite Mission. Today I wish to share with you a continuation of my series on St. John of the Cross's Dark Night of the Soul. And we are on book 2, speaking about the dark night of the spirit, and on chapter 10. And today I'd like to share with you on chapter 10 and 11. So in this chapter 10, St. John of the Cross, he uses this very popular simile that he uses of a log of wood that is on fire to explain the spiritual journey, particularly the purification experienced by the person in the dark night. So he first says that just like how the fire dispels all the moisture in the log of wood, that God also, before transforming the soul, first dispels from it all the qualities, attributes that are contrary to him. Then, just like how the fire turns the wood into like a dark color, so also the divine purification will stir within us all the or awareness of our evil attributes, our imperfections, everything that is contrary to God. It stirs up in our soul a view of that, a visibility of that, and a keen awareness of that, so that they can be dispelled. And that they are clearly seen, these impurities and these weaknesses and imperfections are clearly seen in the dark light of divine contemplation. And that is why we need to persevere in the contemplative life, even when we become aware of our weaknesses and imperfections, because that is a sign that God is preparing to dispel them from us. Even though the person has not become more evil than they were before, they feel that way because they are keenly aware of their own evil and the ugliness that is in their soul. But they are not becoming in actuality. In reality, they are the same person, but it's just that they become very keenly aware of all these evil and imperfections and weaknesses that previously they did not even pay attention to. The soul is like the wood that becomes like fire when it is, eventually when the fire penetrates the wood, the wood becomes like the fire, taking on the attributes of fire. Eventually, after the purification of the soul takes on the loving wisdom and the light of God. So the loving wisdom and light of God infuses this dark night only to bring the soul or transform that soul into itself, that is loving wisdom and the light of God himself. This is a gradual transformation, and it is essential for the soul. First, as how the wood cannot become like fire until it is devoid of moisture and is prepared and transformed from wood into fire, so also the soul cannot experience the divine union unless it is purged of its attributes and it takes on the attributes of God. And there are 7 points that St. John of the Cross deduces from this particular simile of the log of wood on fire. The first one, quote, "The very loving light and wisdom into which the soul will be transformed is what is in the beginning purging and preparing the soul." So that's the first point that we need to internalize. The experience, however, the experiences of the suffering does not come from this loving light and wisdom, but it comes from our own weaknesses and our own imperfections. The fire of purification will not have any effect on perfect souls because the soul's own imperfections are the fuel for this fire. So once all the imperfections are gone, there will be no fuel left, and the only thing that will remain in the soul is joy. As the soul goes through this transformation in the fire of love, it is able to see and appreciate the good effects produced, even though only for a few moments. After the work of purification stops for a short period, the soul will be able to perceive and appreciate the good effects it has produced in itself. And then it must continue on to greater heights of holiness. That means greater intensity of purification. So just like how the fire first penetrates only the exterior of the wood, but later it has to go deeper and deeper from the exterior to the interior, so too the fire of divine love must continue to work from our exterior imperfections to our interior imperfections, and the action of the fire of love will become stronger and more intense as it goes more interior. The soul's conscious of its own bitterness, and it feels the full extent of its imperfections and all the evils within itself. It will be more painful as the fire of divine love travels more and more interior. The pain and the suffering and the awareness of the imperfections and evils will also increase. However, during the intervals when the purification stops, the soul does enjoy great consolation and joy, but it's only for a short while. For the purification will then return with greater intensity as it continues to work its way to the very core of the person, just like how the fire does to the log of wood. So in this example, St. John of the Cross helps us to become aware and recognize that this is a journey, and there is various degrees of holiness and there's various degrees of suffering we experience as part of this divine contemplative journey to reach these higher and higher degrees of holiness and perfection while we journey to the union of the soul with God. And there's a great resemblance to what the souls experience in purgatory, and that's what St. John of the Cross says. And in chapter 11, he again speaks of this action of the fire of love on our soul, that it is painful contemplation. However, it has many rich fruits, including the awakening of a great intensity of divine love. It's with a greater intensity. The divine love that we have for God reaches high intensity as we go through the spiritual night. This love is much more than what the soul experienced in the sensory night. This divine love experienced by the soul during the spiritual night is as different as the body is different from the spirit. And it is as different as the soul's experience in the sensory night would have been of a much lower intensity and degree than what the soul is experiencing in this spiritual night. The divine love experienced by the soul during the spiritual night is as different as the body is from the spirit. It is a foretaste of God, without any new understanding in the intellect, because the intellect is still dark. It doesn't gain any intellectual knowledge because this is a purely spiritual, infused experience. It is not to do with our faculties. So the intellect is still dark, but the intensity of the divine love is high. If it is an intense love, it is an infused love, it is a passive love brought about by God's work in the soul. It is a love generated in the soul by God to prepare it for union with Himself. The soul is infused with an intense love that resembles the love of God. This is God's action in the soul for the divine union. Since God doesn't override our own free will, the soul does have to give consent to allow this radical transformation. Even though this love is an action of God, it requires our consent. And it is infused without any effort on our part. other than being receptive. All the appetites of the person, the soul, are weakened, the soul is recollected, and the soul is given all the necessary capacity it needs for the strong union of love with God. The soul loves God with all its faculties, all its strength, and all its being. In a way, it has never loved God in this way before. For God himself has gathered every part of that person, the sensory and the spiritual, the body and the spirit, the faculties, the strengths and appetites, and God has transformed it into a love so pure, so intense, and so like himself that it is humanly impossible to bring this harmonious, powerful love for God by our human effort. As much as the intensity and strength of this divine love, so much is also the yearning of that soul for God. The soul thirsts for God. Even though it enjoys God's companionship and experiences an interior strength, there is still an intense desire and a longing for God. And John of the Cross says, quote, "The touch of this divine love and fire so dries up the spirit, so enkindles the soul's longings to slake its thirst for this love, that such persons go over these longings in their mind 1,000 times and pine for God in 1,000 ways." And so I'd like to conclude chapter 11 of book 2 by reading this one line from St. John of the Cross's Dark Night poem. "One dark night, fired with love's urgent longings." So with that divine love in the soul thirsts for God in a way that it has never thirsted for him before. And it experienced the intensity of holiness, the intensity of love, and this pure love for God as it has never experienced even while it went through the sensory night. So thank you for watching. Have a blessed day, and I will record my next video in a couple of weeks.